Hi listeners, this is John from the team at HR Stories. I hope you've had a wonderful holiday season. In the last 6 months, the team at HR Stories has answered over 50 of your questions on our Q&A podcast edition, from orientation to termination, from the simple to the complex, from the fun to the serious. We've answered them all with the goal of helping you get HR right. We thought it would be a good time to recap our top 10 favorite questions of 2023. Listen and enjoy. Happy New Year from the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. Is it HR's responsibility to address personal hygiene in the workplace?
Wow. I've dealt with that several times as an HR director. It depends. Once again, it should be a manager's job to deal with that at first. Sometimes managers don't know how to deal with it. They may feel uncomfortable. But another reason that it may be, they should always get HR's involvement, because it could be something that leads to maybe there's some sort of disability going on. There could be, who knows what it could be. So it is HR's responsibility to ensure that any addressing of personal hygiene in the workplace is done in a caring, but also a non-threatening and, positive way, keeping many things in mind. So I don't know if that answers the question. That's not a simple yes or no.
I think it's saying, well, should I be doing that? Or should the manager be doing that? Right? Who should be addressing that in the workplace? And I think your answer is great. As a manager, before I got into this whole HR world, I had to address that numerous times. I remember I had somebody that had a body odor, and the staff came to me and said, look, this is ridiculous. We can't work in these conditions. You need to address this. And as the manager of the department, I did do that. But I think your point to getting HR involved, because there could be a reason under the Americans with Disability Act that person has those issues. Or let's think about this. It could be a religious accommodation, right? And so knowing all of those things. And so I think, yes, the manager should probably be saying the words, but they need to be backed up by the HR department or the HR professional in terms of religious accommodations, in terms of Americans with Disability accommodations, and really kind of walk through that. I would say, right, and Chuck, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I would say, please make sure that you have a policy when it comes to personal hygiene, right? There.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was just going to throw that out there, right? When you were done with your thoughts, I was going to say, make sure you have a policy that covers personal hygiene, specifically odors. And I will tell you a quick story in regards to this situation. I had to approach an employee, a manager, that had extremely bad breath. And I've told this story before, but it was so bad that we're in meetings and people couldn't sit next to the person. In fact, you couldn't even stay in the same room after a certain point, but it was unnatural. It was unnatural bad breath. So I had to approach them. Number one, they had no idea. Number two, they said no one had ever told them. And I'm thinking, wow, your family, your wife never said anything? Okay. But number three, they ended up finding out in the long run they had some sort of medical condition that they thanked me for later, weeks later, saying that I probably saved their life.
What should be included in an AI policy going forward?
It's interesting you bring this up. It's come up. I've read it on our forum, the HR Team of One community forum. People are looking for a policy, specifically AI, regarding third-party tools like ChatGPT and Bard, as well as things that result in images and text and other content that are generated by what they call machine learning. So, John, what I did and what we did here at the team at HR Stories is not only do I have an answer to that question, but I've taken the bones of that answer. We've created a policy. Number one, you need to define exactly what AI tools you're talking about. And I already did that. Third-party tools, like ChatGPT and Bard. Another section is you need to have talk about the responsible usage of the AI technologies. Perhaps have some sort of training and familiarization policy, and talk about the ethical use, how employees are expected to use and not use AI technology, especially when it comes to any form of discrimination or hate speech. And make sure you cover that your harassment policy is still in effect in any type of AI.
Are you saying, like, if I use AI to do something, write an email or create communication out, and there is hate speech in it or racial discrimination in it, I, as the user, am still responsible? I can't be like, oh, well, AI said that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, built into any good policy is going to be a human review. Okay, you're going to have some sort of human review. Next part of the policy is data privacy and security. How are you going to handle your data and the protection of personal information? And a lot of times people are thinking, oh, I'll just put all this info into AI and it'll generate stuff back. Well, if you're putting in proprietary information, company information, personal information, where is all that going? I'll tell you where it's probably going, in some giant vat out there that's going to be sliced, diced, regurgitated, and used for whatever purpose. So you need to have a policy that covers those types of protections. We talked about the quality and accuracy. I found inaccuracies. I found names of people, I found situations, but they didn't mesh up. They were not true. And the powers that be are calling that hallucinations. AI third-party learning tools like ChatGPT have things called hallucinations. So what do you do when that happens? What's the human oversight and review? Those have to be covered in your policies. The other areas are ownership and AI-generated content. Where is the AI content being generated from? And so you need to make sure that you are not violating any third-party intellectual property rights. You have to understand that, and respect for copyright and trademark. And then you have to also, on the reverse side, what about your confidential and trade secret information? You better read the fine print of when you signed up for ChatGPT, because now that code is out there. Finally, I'm going to say usage of results. Are you going to use them externally? Are you going to use them internally? Are you maybe a consultant and you're going to use the AI generated content to develop policies, procedures, pictures for clients and just give it to them, and they think you're brilliant? Next thing you know, you're violating all kind of copyrights and they're on the hook.
So what's happening is they have an employee, right? So they have an employee that goes around going, oh, they don't give me enough hours. They used to give me tons of overtime, but every day there's just not enough out, right? They go through this day in and day out complaining about it. Obviously, kind of policy change, something happened that this person's hours were reduced and they haven't gotten over it yet. So how do you talk to that person in the workplace?
Well, the first thing we need to understand is they're legally protected to discuss that in the workplace. But are they legally protected to do it while they should be doing their job? Is it affecting their job? Is it affecting other people? And so there is a fine line. But I've worked for places where we would schedule people 38 hours on a regular basis. They would always get 40 or 41 hours, but when we scheduled them 40 hours, they always got overtime, right? So we would schedule them 37, 38 hours just to have a little bit of that cushion in there. And we had employees that would come and they would complain and, oh, I don't get overtime, I get overtime. And, I'd commiserate, say, yes, but let me explain to you why we're doing this. Sometimes you can't reason with people that are very, that are emotionally vested, but you can try. So I would reason with them and explain to them why we're doing this. I would then maybe look at other opportunities for them to pick up hours elsewhere if that's a possibility. But ultimately, unless it's affecting their work and the work of others, you're going to have to let them, I guess, continue to vent in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting that you went that way. I didn't even think of that, right? I love that our minds are totally different. I was thinking about, this is your personal brand, right? Your personal brand is how people perceive you in the workplace. And if you're there venting about your hours and you're doing it consistently, people are going to have a negative viewpoint of you in the workplace.
Right.
Right. And so how do we have that conversation? Because I'm thinking, well, the way I would address it, I would sit down with the person and say, look, you have a right to have those comments, right? You have that under the National Labor Relations Board. You can vent about those things to other coworkers and all that kind of stuff. But what is the perception of how other people are perceiving you? Now people aren't perceiving you as a team player. They're not thinking about you as, oh, that person would be a great to promote into a new role. They're not seeing that. And I would have that conversation with them and say, look, every time you come into work, it's about your personal brand. And people are making decisions based on what you put out there. And if you're always going to be complaining about not getting overtime because we changed this policy and here's why we changed this policy, I can't help you down the road, right? And so we know those negative Nancy's that are in that workplace. Oh, everything's terrible. They're just not perceived as team players in doing that, right? And kind of bringing that in there, I think that's how I would approach it. A little bit different.
Sure. Absolutely. And you know what, with the disclaimer, and I had mine was not negative Nancy, it was Luther. And Luther, it was basically, you have every right to talk about your pay, but Luther, you're getting on everyone's nerves. Your employee, your coworkers are annoyed. You're just getting on everyone's nerves. So really just manage it and pull that card out. So good.
Yeah. All right. So question, and our final question of the day. Jaylene asked, I have an employee who had some issue with micromanaging other coworkers, and she's not even a manager. Her manager has talked to her several times about this, and the employee has had meetings with me about it at her request. Now she's asking for me to sit in on her semi-annual review. I feel like that's not common and should be done as a part of a regular review. What are your thoughts? How would you handle this? The employee is a tenured employee, admits she's overstepped boundaries. I'm fairly new as I've always been part of a bigger HR team, but now I'm the one and only, right? Department of one. For reference, the EE is fully remote, but lives in the same city as our office and requested to come in for this meeting. The manager is full-time in the office.
Well, the one thing I'm going to say, Jaylene, is make sure you are part of the HR Team of One community on Facebook. That is our community. It is free and it is great. This question would be a great question to be posed on that HR Team of One community on Facebook. So many little things to break down as far as what are the micromanaging. Sometimes we would call that being nosy and being pushy and being bossy and like stepping out of your lane, shall we say. In other words, in other ways, it may be a more senior person that says, hey, you could get better results if you did this, even though they're not the boss. But as I read the question, I think ultimately the question is the employee's asking for the HR person to sit in on the semi-annual review. And the HR person is saying, what do I do? What are my thoughts? How would you handle it? I would sit in on the review.
Would you, let me ask,
but that's
would you, so you're going to sit on the employee's review. Would you talk to the manager and prepare the manager that, hey, I'm coming in, blah, blah, blah.
what conversation would you have there?
Total game plan. Total game plan. Offense and defensive coordinator. Everyone's in there. What's the review? What's the deal? What's the behind the scenes? Tell me what you're not telling me. And we need to figure out what's the real issues here. And where are we going with this review? How can I support you in this review? How can I be like, okay, maybe we shouldn't say that. Maybe we should. It would be a total structured game plan before I went in with that room.
Let me ask you this, because when you hear that, like, hey, when you hear from an employee, I want you to be in my review with my manager, do you get like an spidey sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would touch base with the employees. Why do you want me in the review? Why do you need me there? And maybe it might be like, oh, I don't know. You never know. But when I tell folks your number one job is really to protect the company. So maybe there's something else going on, right? What else is happening? That's the big thing with HR is issues spotting. What else could be there? So yeah, talk to the employee. Why do you want me there? What's going on? And then you work with the manager to say, what's in the review? What are you going to be talking about? And you play both sides. So to be a total game plan in your own mind. And also when the review happens, you're there to move it along so it's efficient and effective.
All right. My next question, based on this question, not a new question. So as an HR director or as an HR professional, do you find or do you think it's your responsibility to sit down in the annual review or semi-annual review with every manager and employee to be part of every one of those conversations?
Heck no. Heck no. No. Some HR people like to do that, be part of that. I never was. I would only be present just because the employee asked, and now that's raising a concern.
Okay, yeah. I just wondered. I don't like as a manager. No
Less time
offense,
for that.
No offense to the HR people, but I find that's a barrier for me building trust with this person. Right? Because now we have another person, right? We have shorthand, right? We have company shorthand or we have team shorthand that we use. And we may act one way among ourselves, which may not be as HR friendly. Like we may use a curse word here and there, like that kind of stuff. And so I do see that as a barrier, but I do think there is something, right? So I always teach my managers, there is something comforting knowing that you have that HR support in the room. So if it does go the wrong way, you can do that. But I don't want to set up as a cultural thing that, oh, either the HR person is going to be there every single time or the HR person is not going to be there. Because if you do it only when there's an issue, then anytime that employee gets the invite and sees HR is there, they already know there's an issue. And so I would just be careful of doing that. So, I mean, again, the good answer, Chuck. I really
absolutely
thank you for diving into that and thinking about
and you
that.
brought up a great point. Let the managers manage. That's what they do. That's what they're supposed to do. And you're right. It won't build that trust. So beautiful. So this is a bit of a sticky situation, so to speak. And you know, we've said so many times text messages can get people in trouble. So this listener has a male employee that sent a female coworker employee an inappropriate Snapchat over the weekend at 3 a.m. saying something along the lines of, and in quotes, "Show me your boobs." So then the male employee sends her another message the next day saying, "Oh my, this was a mistake. He had meant to send the message to someone else."
Okay.
Now, the female employee talked to her manager and another employee about it, but it did get around the office a bit before it came to the HR person. And the HR person did speak with the female employee, and the employee said she did not want to file a complaint against her coworker. She showed the Snapchat thread, but the original message had already been deleted, and all that the HR folks saw was the apology message. So the question on the table here is there any other action needs to be done?
Okay, so is there anything else we need to do from an HR point of view? I do think that I would definitely document my conversation, right? Document. I also think I would probably have a conversation, although it will be embarrassing for both of us, with the male employee as well.
Yeah.
And explaining to him how that could be offensive, and I would pull up our policy of work conduct, and I would say, look, this is why, blah, blah, blah. I understand that you did it accidentally, or at least you're saying that, but, right? And then I would also document that conversation, and hopefully that would be the end of it. But here's the thing, right? Now you have it going around and doing it and dealing with it in the workplace, and there's not much you can do. You could, depending on the company, you could move up your sexual harassment training. Right? Kind of just maybe influence that. Or if you're not doing sexual harassment training, maybe do sexual harassment training, which, just as a plug, Chuck does this fantastically. And so maybe that's it. I don't know. What do you think, Chuck? You're the sexual harassment expert.
Yeah, I would say that a one-time thing, an accidental thing, if this male employee had never done this before, you're right. Document it. You need to document it, and document it with the female employee to say, okay, I'm documenting that. Nothing, you require no other action. We're good. We're all good here. Boom, boom, boom. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Because if things happen again, if this person happens to be a serial, and I don't mean like your breakfast cereal, I'm talking about like a constant repeat offender of, oh, I accidentally did that. Oh, I accidentally brushed up against her. Oh, I accidentally said. Then it's like, okay, we're seeing patterns.
Yeah.
So you're going to document. I think you got I think you nailed it, John. You nailed that answer.
I've recently joined a small family-owned company that has little to no HR. So far, it looks like the files were kept in order. Good. It's a very paper-oriented company, not much digitally, right? Not much digitally. This is the first for me to be on a team of one. So this person is an HR team of one, and have no processes in place. Any advice where you would start putting processes in place? And so, Chuck, the real question underlying all this is like, hey, I'm new to handling HR for a department of one. Where should I start? Where should I focus my energy on first? What should I do first?
Yeah, so I guess we're saying the files are in order, so you've already done and looked at that. Yeah, it's a tough question in the way that not knowing enough info on the size and company and things like that. But taking your question at face value, I'm going to say, first of all, the fact that it's a paper company is no big deal, because in all reality, you want to have processes in place in paper. And then if you want to move to electronic or something, you can. But the important thing is, have processes. So just throwing it out there, John, I'm thinking definitely, all right, so a couple of processes I would put in place. No right or wrong answer, just some processes. Number one, I would make sure there is a recruiting process, right? In other words, some way to track job openings, job closings, approvals, applications, resumes, tracking your, who you're offering jobs to, having a job offer letter, having consistent letters or a way to inform candidates that you are moving or are not moving forward with them. But I would focus, first of all, on a recruiting process. Get that consistent.
Okay.
That's first thing. Second thing is I would probably, as you know, there's so many processes, but I'm thinking of an exit process. You want to take a look at and not so much the exit process, but a process for, and I know we don't like using this word as much, but that employee discipline, coachings, counselings, and maybe if you have to, ultimately some sort of termination, but having a process that's consistent, right? That's why you want to have a process for dealing with coachings, counselings, and terminations, because that will go a long way, not only in protecting your company, obviously, but in efficiency. So you didn't mention anything about a handbook. So you want to make sure you get a handbook together, because that's going to help you with process creation. And the only other thing I can think of, John, the third process is to put in place, if they have 15 or more employees, or if you have, as a questioner, if you have 15 or more employees, you need to have in place a process for sexual harassment. Training your employees, training your managers, and most importantly, definitely a process in place for employees on what to do to complain or make a concern, bubble a concern up on any type of harassment or sexual harassment. So those are things that come to mind when I read this question.
Yeah, I love that. I love that way you were kind of thinking through that. For me, because you mentioned it, the employee handbook to me would be the first place I would start, right? Because when we go in, we're new to an organization, the employee handbook is going to give us some hints and some understanding of how the company is being run, where they are in their policy. Is there a lot of policies? Are there no policies? And that will really do that. The other thing that I also would really probably want to do is having early on conversation with my boss or the owner of the company and ask, how will you know that I'm successful? What do you want me to focus on first? And it may be, I need you to focus on the administration, the recruiting, the exit interviews, the performance management, the administration, the I-9s, payroll, all that stuff, and making sure that's up to date. Or they may be like, look, our culture sucks here, and I need you to focus on that. So again, getting guidance from above is going to help going, okay, this is what I need to focus on. But I think all of this needs to be done. I just think you really want to pick one thing, focus on that, get that right, and then move on and do that. You can't do everything at once. And I think a lot of times this Department of One will come from an organization that had all these things in place and we had more than one person and that kind of stuff. And it seems like, we need to do that here. You can't, right? You're going to need to focus on the employees are going to come to you with issues and that kind of stuff. And you need to go, okay, I got 50 hours a week. Where am I going to focus my time and do that and kind of narrow it down? And that's going to be, as Chuck said, it's going to be individual for your company. So that was a good question, Chuck.
Yeah.
All right.
And I just want to throw out one more thing you said is you cannot, and you didn't say it here, but we've said it in the past, you can't do HR in a vacuum. So get with that's right. I love that. I was just throwing out processes, but I missed the most important thing that you brought up. Get with your boss, the owner of the company or something, and ask them, what processes need to be in place, do you think, boss, to make us more efficient? And start there. Good point, John.
Yeah, and then obviously you're going to advise them because you have the expertise in human resources. So you may I know you think that the company picnic is really important, but that's probably low on our low-hanging fruit. Let's start with the big stuff and let's get down in there.
When you feel that you're being targeted and treated unfairly at work, and you are the HR person, right? But you are the only one in HR, you're a team of one in HR, and you feel you're being treated unfairly at work, where do you go? And I do have some additional information for this that might help. This questioner, this listener, and this is actually from the team, HR team of one community, our Facebook page. This person said the company owner has commented to her that she is not professional now that she's become a mother. I'm not professional now now that you've become a mother, and has started requiring me to send him half hourly schedule for each day and a summary of everything I did each day at the end of the day.
Yeah, and so refresh my memory. Is she a remote worker? I think she was a remote worker.
Yeah, I don't know. I know she's employed in DC, Washington, DC.
Yeah, that's fine. And so when I hear that there's been a change of direction from the supervisor because the person is now a mother, so she's recently had a child, is what I'm assuming. And now this person, the supervisor, is getting on their case and asking them to do specific things. I get this gut feeling, Chuck. I get a little nervous that we may be going into pregnancy discrimination lawsuit, or sexual harassment lawsuit. So what do we do? What do I do? I am the department of one, so I have no HR person to go to. This person's the owner or CEO of the company. So my first question, is there somebody over them? Is there a group of board of directors? Is there a chairman of the board, right? So I'm trying to think about that. What advice would you give, Chuck?
Yeah, well, that's really all you can do at this point. You know, who, if it's a business owner and it's a sole business owner, there's not much more, unless you truly believe in your heart that it is an EEOC violation, that they are treating you differently because A, maybe gender female, B, because of pregnancy or the fact that you are a parent, and you're able to show I'm being treated differently than anyone else that reports to this owner, you may have a case, at which point you could either A, stick it out and try and steer them, or B, you leave the company, and C, you could do either of these things, but you could contact the EEOC and file a complaint saying, I'm not going to leave my job, but I need some help.
And here's the thing, and I think this is the advice I gave on the webpage, is, to me, it sounds like this person is unhappy. The CEO is unhappy with the HR's performance. And I think some of the things this person was saying was, well, I'm focused on this and that kind of stuff. And so always, and this is really for employees, and as HR professionals, we are employees and HR professionals and managers. If the employee is not doing what you want, asking them to give you a half an hour progress report is silly, right? That's micromanaging, right? That you're treating them like they're in high school or they're kids, and if that's the only way. And so I would ask this HR professional to sit down with the CEO and ask this question: where do you want me to focus my time?
Yeah. Here's
all the things I'm working on, right? And do it in a way that's not going to be upsetting, right? And so I'm probably not clearly doing that. But I would ask, where do you want me to put my focus on? Because I may be focusing on something that I think is really important for the company, and their focus is on, and I think the example she gave, now I may be getting my questions mixed up, but the example she gave was the CEO said to her, why is Patty complaining to me that her paycheck isn't right? And so to me, what the hidden message there is, why do I, as the CEO, have to deal with this silly thing? You should be dealing with it. That's why we hired you, right? And so having that clear conversation with the CEO about where your focus should be, because honestly, if I was that HR department and I was focused on a HR sexual harassment claim in my organization, I may have let Patty's paycheck go off a little bit. Not that long, but I may. Right. And so I think that's where I would start. That would be my advice there. I don't know,
Yeah.
Chuck, if you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I think you're spot on. But what I missed in some of this was, have you talked to your boss? Have you laid out your case and just gone to them? So that's who you talk to. You talk to them first, and you say, look, here's the deal. And this could be, I'm uncomfortable with it. It could be discrimination. It could be. So I think you talk to them first. But at the end of the day, you have to be happy. So you need to decide, are you going to stay? And I know there were a lot of comments on our Facebook page on this one. Some more people are saying, stay and fight. Others were saying, get your resume together. So it was a really good generator of conversation.
Julie from Toledo, Ohio. A large public company acquired their small, private, 140 employee company. What do we need to do from an HR perspective? What should we keep in mind? I think it's a great question, Chuck. What do you think? I know you've been through a couple of these mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've been on it several times on the front end, where we go in and we take over a hotel or a business. And I've been on it on the back end when we get taken over. And the HR role in that, in either situation, there's one HR role that is the same, and that's communication. So staying in communication and communicating to your people what's going on. Now, in this role where you are the taking over, you're getting taken over. Your role is to facilitate, work with their HR people, communicate with them, find out what they want, and then and maybe even create a checklist. I mean, we've got a great merger and acquisition checklist on the Ultimate Guide of HR Checklist book that we have written. But you want to be able to be in touch with their folks. They're going to drive it. So they're a large public company. They're going to drive it. They probably know exactly what they want. So your role is going to is to be able to make yourself absolutely available to them, but also available to your people, because your people are going to have a lot of questions. What's going to happen with my vacation? What's going to happen with my benefits? What's going to happen with my pay rate? What's going to happen with my job? So you want to be able to start answering those questions. And as you learn more info as they take over, you want to be the conduit that is the communicator to the team. Because a lot of times even your senior leadership may not be privy. So you want to establish a good confidential relationship with that company and then be the communicator to ease the discernation. What's the word? Where the people are a little, consternation of your folks. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree with all that. I think that's fantastic. I do have a follow-up question for you, but I was thinking it's about trust, right? And your team is going to trust you more than these strangers, right? I mean, that's just normal thing. And so being that person, and the question becomes, right, are there going to be big changes? And obviously we don't know from this question, because I've been in situations where companies have been acquired and it's more of a financial thing and nothing really changes for the employees. Everything stays the same. Yeah. Is there. Maybe benefits get better because it's a bigger company, that kind of stuff. But if it's a company that's coming in and they're going to be driving how the organization does things and change things, that becomes a bigger deal. And so really being transparent as possible that changes are coming. And then you'll let them, as soon as you'll let the team know. I think that becomes really important. Don't kind of hold back, let them know. So you want to build it up so they trust you and do that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So here's my follow-up question, Chuck. So this is a private, right? Individual owner, private company. And now they're going to public. They're being now publicly stock traded, that kind of stuff. Do you see anything from the HR perspective that will change for the employees and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, there may be some from the accounting side, from the HR side, a little more accountability, a little more ethics type of thing. Usually you won't see too much with the Sarbanes-Oxley from the rules from the HR side, but there definitely is going to be a greater focus on record keeping and maintaining records and doing everything really well buttoned up, because there will be auditors now that are going to come in on a yearly basis. They're going to see employee files, they're going to see samplings, and especially the 401k audits are just going to be amped up a little bit. So that's what I see. But I just want to follow up with your thing of trust. You are absolutely right. The people are going to trust you as the HR person more than the other group. And so the more that you can get answers to their questions and appear to be the calm person in the situation, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I always say the other thing when it comes to the public company, the compensation packages may be changed because there may be stock investments and stock bonuses and all that kind of stuff. So just kind of paying attention to that as well in terms of compensation and stuff. So this is from Jennifer. And Jennifer says this: employee calls off and uses unexpected vacation time for personal issues for the first part of the work week. Then it's a he, is a no call, no show for 2 days, and then drops off his company property at our facility and not saying a word to anyone. We discover the property hours later and reach out, and the employee then confirms that they quit. Would you pay for the vacation time? So they've quit on you, but they took 2 days, I think it was, of vacation time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's my thought. That would depend. I'm going to go back to two things: your policy and probably your state law. So it depends on what your policy is. If your policy is combined PTO and vacation and sick pay that employees can use at any time that they want to, then yeah, you probably would pay it out if that's what your policy says. But if your policy is like, hey, you used vacation time, employee, that no call, no show, and quit, and our policy is you have to give a week or 2 weeks notice to have vacation time approved, and they did not, then I would not pay it out. Also, I guess I'm thinking you want to check what the state law is, if there's any obligation that you have to pay out any accrued vacation no matter what. Okay, yeah. Some state laws have that. But absence of any policy or state law, you literally could do whatever you want. So no, you don't have to pay it out. But that would really end up being on your end. Professionally, I certainly understand, and personally, why you would not want to pay it out, and you probably won't have to, at least within, if you're within your legal boundaries.
Yeah, that's funny because my reaction is just pay them. Just pay them. Just get it over with. Just pay them. Just let them go and don't make a big deal about it. But after I say that, I started thinking about, all right, well, if I do that for them, what's the ramification down the road? Now, are other people going to go, well, you did it for John, so now you have to do it for Julie and Chuck and right and Jose, right? And so you have to be really careful when you're making these decisions, right? Chuck's right. First thing is what does your state law say, right? And most likely your policies are going to be based on state law. So again, and then you look at your policies, and then without any of that guidance, then you really have that there. And so, but when you're making that decision, right, Jennifer, when you're making that decision, I would be thinking about, all right, if I do it for this person, am I going to continue to do that going forward? Or if I don't do it for this person, am I going to continue that going forward? And so this really comes down to, and I think the important thing that I would stress is having good policies up front so you're not in those situations, right? And so hey, this is what our policy is. So
yeah. And John, I just want to add, a lot of policies will say you cannot use vacation or PTO in lieu of 2 weeks notice. So a lot of times people will say, well, I want to give 2 weeks notice, but I want to use 1 week as vacation. And then you basically get 1 week of work for me. If you have a policy like that, you definitely do not have to pay this out also. So good points.
Yeah. That's funny because we had a policy. I worked in manufacturing, and we had a policy. If you gave your 2 weeks notice, that was your last day. Yeah, because we were working with high confidential military stuff, and so we didn't want them around that if that was the case. And then we would pay them for the last 2 weeks. We'd pay them. We're like, all right, boom. But everyone knew that. And so the employees would come in on Friday and then start their new job on Monday, but they would also get 2 weeks of pay from us. But that was that was the way we worked, and that was fine.
Angie says, I recently discovered an employee is recording her teammates when she leaves the room to find out what they're saying about her when she is gone. It's a small office, 3 people on a remote location, right? So this is not in their big office, but it's in the remote thing. And let's just say it's not good. I feel the employee who feels compelled to do this, she said, is recording to protect herself, quote unquote, although from what she could not say. I'm sitting down with her tomorrow to talk. Our culture is everything to us, and why I couldn't imagine this going on in the home office where she works. I'm not so as intimate with the nuances of the remote office. Besides checking in and encouraging her to foster her relationship with these other 2 employees, any other words of a wisdom's and encouraging her to stop recording the employees in Texas if there is any laws that prohibit this too?
Yeah. I love this question. I love looking at this. And I have to say that, first of all, there's still so many questions I have of this. How do you know she was recording? How did we find out? What have we done with previous recordings? I mean,
so my understanding is that the person that was doing the recording told the questioner. If that helps. I don't know if that helps or not, but right.
Okay.
So that's my question.
Okay. Well, the overall law, no, it's okay. The overall law is, now some states are 2-party consent. Like Florida's 2-party consent. You cannot record without the other person knowing, hey, I'm recording. But Texas is a 1-party consent state. So when I read that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But there's a rub here, okay? 1-party consent state, so you have the right to record a conversation as long as at least one party of the conversation consents and is aware of the recording. But it goes a little deeper. The interpretation of that is that the one party is involved in the conversation, right? So let's say I'm gonna record you, John, and I'm involved in the conversation. I'm talking to you. I don't have to tell you, okay? And so that's what that means. But here's the deal. If you are involved in the conversation, you can give your own lawful consent in Texas. But if you're not involved in the conversation, and based on what you told me, she is not involved in the conversation. She's leaving like a tape recorder in a room and she's walking out. So with that in mind, under Texas law, you cannot lawfully make secret audio recordings because you're not there involved in the conversation to give consent. So
mic
boom, drop the mic. How's that?
All right. So what's your advice to Angie?
My advice to Angie is tell her that what she's doing is illegal. Play the legal card. Unless you have a policy, a privacy policy, or something along those lines between employees, is you want to pull out the legal side of things. But I don't know what policy, John, that would cover that. And it's just, the other people might pull out the legal side of things and say, That's illegal. You can't do that. And now that person has broken the law. That person could be terminated for breaking the law.
Like, you've just told me that you're breaking the law, right? And so that would be the same thing if somebody says, well, I robbed the bank yesterday. You're not going to be like, oh, well, that's great. Yeah, that's nice. Thanks for telling me, right? You're probably going to look into that person. They broke the law. Probably, right? And that's the whole thing. And there's probably a code of conduct that you have that you could go back to and say, look, based on our code of conduct, it says you would not break laws or do anything illegal, blah, blah, blah. We're going to have to let you go, terminate you immediately. Goodbye, right? That's the hard hat.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take that on. I think there's two things. One, there's the recording, illegal, stop immediately. If I catch you doing it again, you're going to be fired. And then the second thing is, now I'm curious though, what's happening that you feel that you need to record your coworkers when you leave the room? And I'm going to do an investigation. Right. I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to talk to the other two coworkers, and I'm going to find what's going on there. Because is there any oversight in that office? Who's in charge? Who's responsible, right? And so I think there's a lot. And I think as the HR person spending a lot of time in the big home office, I'm now going to start spending time in this office. I may work there remotely once a month for a couple of days just to see what it's like, just to get in there, building that trust up, building those relationships up to get there as well. So.
Yeah. Well, here's a neat twist to this. According to the law, public conversations recorded in a public place are not subject to the same law. So let's say this person knew that these two people were going to whatever park bench in a public place and talking. They could record the conversations there without their. So, it's just really freaky tiki in the end. Why are you recording them? What's the culture? What's going on? And, seriously. And the other thing is, if they don't terminate the employee and the other employees find out about it, and there were conversations already done, is the employer liable? So if you got to protect the company, I think we got to go to your hard hat solution, and you have to terminate that person.
Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.